we have jumped into the working capital management system. We started with the liquidity ratios, and what drives liquidity ratio is turnover ratios. So that's why immediately we started with the turnover ratios. And this liquidity ratio and turnover ratio both are the I can say KPI, key performance index, for the working capital management. That's how these topics are linked. How to improvise the efficiency ratios or turnover ratios, and that's where the working capital comes into the picture. So if you want to utilize your assets in an efficient manner, so in that case, working capital management topic comes into the picture. So liquidity ratio, what drives liquidity and profitability? Turnover ratios. What drives turnover ratios? Working capital management. So this is where how to manage this current asset and current liability. That's how the working capital come into picture. In general, working capital refers to gross, that is nothing but current asset. Specifically, working capital always refers to net working capital, that is difference between the current assets minus current liabilities. So this is the concept. And another point, so I want to take it to the finance function of the finance manager, because our sessions, the Arya Academy sessions, not only helps to pass the WCM with 400 plus score, but also when you go back to the industry, when you become the finance manager, the finance function need to be understood very well. So the finance function, basically the focus is on the shareholder value, how to improvise the shareholder value. What exactly finance manager role, क्या करना चाहिए, what we have to do. So there are two things that you have to do. One is minimization of cost. I'm talking about broader concept, minimization of cost. And the second thing is that maximization of returns. Maximization of returns. So now from the finance function point of view, so the function starts with the function just a sec. The function starts with procurement of funds. Procurement of funds. So procurement of funds means any business organization, if you want to start, first you have to get in the funds. What are the sources of funds? So that is called here procurement of funds. So we have two types of funds here. One is long-term sources. Another is short-term sources of funds, right? So long-term sources of funds are basically two types. One is own funds. Another is borrowed funds or loan funds. So this is what the long-term debt or non-current liability. That's where we discussed here. The balance sheet, equity, own funds, shareholder equity. long-term debt or non-current liability. So own funds, nothing but shareholders' funds, and loan funds, long-term debt, non-current liability. And the decisions, what we are going to take about these own funds and loan funds, that decision is capital structure decision. Capital structure decision, we can say it as cost of capital or weighted average cost of capital. This is also part of uh, corporate finance. That is the current liabilities. That is the current liabilities, right? And I'll come back to maximization of returns, and that will be categorized into. I'll come back to these current liabilities. So maximization of returns, in the sense here, the short-term investments and long-term investments. Long-term investment. Short-term investments means current assets. Current assets. So this particular topic, short-term sources and short-term investment, this is what is about known as, इसको क्या कहते हैं, capital structure decision. This is considered as working capital management decisions. How much portion, how much portion of long-term funds we are using to employ the current assets or the working capital, and how much of short-term, I mean to say current liabilities, we are employing to acquire the current assets or working capital, gross working capital in that case. So I want to repeat this point because this point is very important. So uh, uh, cost, it affects the profit and liquidity and risk. When you are using long-term sources of funds, long-term sources to employ the current assets, because long-term source means ज़्यादा interest payment करेंगे, so cost is high. So long-term sources come with the cost. When cost is high, what is going to be happen? The profit will decrease, right? Profit जो है ना decrease. So how it affects the liquidity? Liquidity will be high because there is no urgency to pay the current assets what we have, right? और आपका जो है रिस्क कम है क्योंकि लिक्विडिटी आपकी ज्यादा है, तो लिक्विडिटी डायरेक्टली impacts the risk. The risk is low. That's there. Okay. Short-term sources of funds, short-term sources. We are going short-term sources. Interest is low. कम interest payment करते हैं. Rates भी कम होते हैं उस पर, right? So the cost is less. So your profit will be more, right? Your profit will be more. Apart from that, liquidity आपकी crunch हो जाएंगी. Liquidity crunch will be there because you are using short-term funds. जल्दी यानी उधर पेमेंट उधर भी करना रहेगा आपको, इधर भी आपके करंट एसेट्स को मैनेज करना पड़ेगा. तो ऑलवेज यू विल बी इन फुल tension how to manage these things. So liquidity is low. When liquidity is low, there is a greater possibility of entering into the risk. Liquidity directly, risk in the context of liquidity I'm talking about, means we are not in a position to pay our liability when it comes due, if this is the situation. So this is what the concept